Hey you guys, it's Dani. Can you tell by the space buns? We are doing hashtag tarot 90s feels today because I cannot resist. I gotta do it. So I've been watching Max Black's video, which I'm doing the VR too. I'm gonna have that down below. I watched hers, I watched Dawn Michelle's, I watched Lisa's, I watched quite a few, and everybody's has been so great. I'm like all up in my feels. So I gathered together a few of my decks. I got 6 of them. We'll try not to make this last too long, but everything that made me feel like the 90s, like nostalgic, grungy, just fun 90s vibes. I don't honestly think, well, I know one for sure was around in the 90s because it's one that I had in the 90s. The other ones I know, like one came out in the 2000s. The other ones I think are all recent, but they all have these 90s feels. So we're not gonna bother going over there. We're just gonna vibe right here. So I want to start with my very first tarot. And while this is a replica, I got mine in 1998-ish. And that is what's been dubbed the Tarot Nova. This comes in the complete kit. Now the one that I got came in this big box with the palmistry little book companion with it, and this deck, it came with the same type of, because a lot of the ones in the 90s came with these, and early 2000s came with these sheets, but I want to say mine was printed on black paper and like a big fold out that actually fit the full cards on it. And I want to say I had a full book. I think that's why it was a bigger box, because the book was bigger. But there's our little book that goes along with this. So I repurchased this because mine got lost to time. I don't know, honestly, I have no idea what happened to it. Sorry, that took longer to get out than I thought it was going to. This is the deck. I want to say, I could be wrong, but I want to say that maybe it was a little bigger, but it was still the same shape, but it might have been a little bit bigger. Maybe I'm wrong. I was a lot smaller then too. I was about 13. And so, of course, this holds all the 90s nostalgia for me because it was the 90s. And I remember so vividly sitting on the floor in my bedroom near my bed, brown shag carpet, laying out these cards and then diving into the guidebook that went with it and just trying to figure it all out, you know? I was the only person that I knew that had tarot cards, you know? And it was like a big thing, and I tried to understand and tried to get what they were telling me. Ooh. So this is definitely my actual like OG in the 90s. Had it, loved it, never forget it. So this is I think it's called now the Tarot Nova. But it's always found in these little sets. Now this next deck I saw mentioned, but I can't talk about 90s feels and 90s vibes without talking about this deck. And I feel like I've been talking about it a lot lately, but like it just fits. It fits for everything. Is it just me? Maybe. I'm just a little obsessed with it. And that's the Black Lily Tarot. But you can't tell me that this doesn't have 90s feels. Like even in the clothing, I don't know if you guys remember, but like in my head, I just remember all the kind of fashion, kind of going back to that slip look. you know, like a dress slip. The celebrities were just like kind of wearing that out. It was like slim bodies that were kind of, what is it, heroin chic, if you will. But this almost has that vibe where it was like, it's like it was that sort of glam per se, like, but it was like sick glam. Does that make sense? Like, that's when I think back on some of the 90s styles, like that's what it reminds me of. It's like there was a glamorous part about it, but like everyone was like really angsty and mad and sad and on drugs. Not me. I was too young for all that. I was a little too young for all that. But like I remember it so vividly, and every time I look at this, it just has those feels for me. It was like what I saw and what I felt, and like the music, the albums, the TV, the fashion, the magazines, like it was the vibe of what I was seeing and where I was, and like my place in the 90s. It was a little bit back and forth, whereas like, yes, I still had my like teeny bopper space where like I loved Hanson and I liked NSYNC and the Spice Girls, and you know, like, because I was still a young kid, but there was another half of me that was, you know, Nirvana and Hole and grunge and Pearl Jam and, you know, Jay and Silent Bob and Mallrats, you know, kind of the dark, seedier side, which I tended to go more towards. And it just, that's what I kind of sat in. So the magazines that I looked at and the fashion that I saw and the movies that I watched, it was more that darker, grungier side. So I tend to think of those kind of things. Even going into the early 2000s, like we still held on, especially me and my friend group, we held on to those 90s grungier vibes. Speaking of movies and such, Murder of Crows reminds me, it gives me those 90s feels because I think of The Crow. It was dark and it was gritty, and there were so many visuals and movies like this. Again, I think because music played such a huge part, music and movies played such a huge part in my youth, that those are the things that I tend to kind of reference when it comes to the 90s, because for me it was movies and music. That was my whole world. You know, the internet didn't come until way later. You know, it wasn't until I was in what, high school probably. Yeah, it was probably, yeah, high school, where like the internet and we started talking on AIM, or you know, like AOL came. Like I remember, you know, finally being able to access that. But even that, like we chatted in CD chat rooms with people we probably shouldn't have, you know, but we didn't have access to this type of stuff that's on the internet now. Like it just wasn't there, right? Or at least I didn't know where to look. But even when I was on there, I was looking at band websites and like making my own GeoCities website, you know what I mean? Just like silly things like that. So we saw stuff like this, and you know, we went to places like rotten.com and just looked at atrocious stuff. You know, it was the time of Marilyn Manson and, you know, STP, and you know, the visuals all went either bright and bubblegum or very dark. And this definitely reminds me of those darker movies like The Crow. So definitely one of like the 90s vibes. Okay, so my next deck definitely reminds me of the 90s, because I will never ever forget the first time I ever saw Interview with the Vampire. I was way too young, probably. I was probably in the 4th or 5th grade, because it came out at about 94, right? So I would have been 4th, 5th grade. And, excuse me. And I saw it. And the first time I caught a glimpse of it, I was at my godmother's house. And I sat in front of that TV. I don't know what was going on. Maybe some construction, because I remember like the door was open and people were like in and out. And I sat in front of that TV. And I did not move. I was enthralled. That's when I became obsessed with vampires. I read everything I could. I looked at everything I could. I rented that movie all the time until I was able to get my hands on that book and understand it, and I read it. So vampires played a huge part in the 90s. And when I think of that, I think of kind of the art that sprung up and the look and the vibes. And so this tarot came out in 2000, so I think it really does hold that 90s version of vampires and the art style of the 90s, that kind of like witchy gothic style that was around in like witchy circles at that time, like what we saw. Even in places like where I'm at, where like I was only able to see those things and find those things at places like Barnes and Noble, or, you know, little shops like that. And that's the Vampire Tarot. So this is very much nostalgic 90s vampire for me. I mean, come on. Look at this. You gotta admit, it's pretty spot on. We've got some Dracula stuff going on here. And everything is red and black. Like it should be. Like it should be. We have, again, Courtney Love. I mean, in vampire form. And Tom Petty. So we know for sure that it's 90s, right? You cannot tell me that you don't see it. You gotta see it. See, even that sort of looks like Brad Pitt in Interview with the Vampire. So, I mean, yes. So this was very much 90s vibes. Dracula, it's like the time that I started reading, you know, it was in the early 2000s where I started really reading, you know, quite large novels when I was, you know, right into my teens. I started reading Salem's Lot and things like that. So it's like seeing these cards like immediately reminds me of that time and of those images that were popular at the time. So definitely the Vampire Tarot, which is out of print, I'm sorry, but it definitely does it does feel those vibes for me, for sure. And I'm sure a lot of other ones. And honorable mention, when looking at this, it also reminds me of the one that, the Witch's Tarot that I showed in one of the Tarot Unknowns, like very 90s, same idea, that same kind of style. I know these are very different, but it's that same look that was around at that time. Anytime you saw or thought about like the witchy side, it's like those are the images that pop into my head when it comes to the 90s, because that was the first kind of art style that was kind of pinned to it that I could recognize as a kid. So yeah, definitely Vampire Tarot. This one just came into my hands, and I cannot help but show this because it immediately reminded me of all of the cartoon styles, and I mean like the weird cartoons that came out in the 90s. I'm talking the Ren and Stimpies of it all, you know, the Beavis and Buttheads, the just weird cartoons of the 90s. And this is the Dang Olsen Dream Tarot. It has the colors, like I said, it went like very grungy, and then we had like the bright colors, like not so much the electric 80s that we had in the very early 90s, which I did have, because in my first grade picture, I was wearing neons, living for it, okay? But this has that kind of strange, like I said, it almost reminds me of like Ren and Stimpy, and then like not literally, but like that whole vibe. And then again, as a kid going into Spencer's, because in the 90s too, there was this whole like callback, as we always do, to like the 70s and the weird shapes and the blacklight posters and all of this kind of weird art. And so this definitely reminds me of kind of the cartoon bright style of the 90s, where things were just kind of strange. Again, that like MTV style cartoons, maybe, I guess you would say. Almost psychedelic vibes in like the checkered and the melting and the surrealist ways that this is going. And I don't know what it is about this deck. It's probably like, I have the Surrealist Tarot, which I was like, this is probably the weirdest thing I have, like art wise, you know, like surrealist art is probably, you know, the strangest thing that I feel like I relate to. But I got this deck, and I think like the style and the colors and the oddity, everything in my head says that I shouldn't like this, but somehow I do. And again, maybe that's why. Maybe it's because somehow this seems so familiar, because it does kind of remind me, especially like the daisies and stuff. There's something about it that does remind me of the 90s. You know, me and my friends had, or my friends and I, whatever. I know we're not coming over here talking about speaking perfect English. We don't do that here. But we had like the smiley face necklaces and, you know, things like that. I don't know, it definitely, it feels that way to me. But I'm curious, has anyone else, I have yet to see a single other person talk about this deck. I'm curious to know if anybody has this, because I've kind of been obsessed. This whole week, I have been shuffling and playing with these cards, and I don't know, I'm kind of, it's like, okay, Merry Melodies Tarot, is that what it was called? By Liminal 11. Like, I thought that was my cartoon deck, that nostalgic cartoon deck, but this surpassed it by far. Like, anyway, I could go on about this, like, I don't know, we'll do a flip through of this one, like a full flip through of this one, but definitely has those 90s feels, like, for real. Okay, last one. This last deck is the first one I thought of when I heard 90s vibes. It is the epitome of what I was doing art-wise in the 90s. What I remember seeing, it's like every card could be an album cover from the 90s. Like a rock style album cover. Seriously. It does. And that's a cult following tarot deck, y'all. So these are the backs. Come on. Did I put these back in order? I did. I must have put these back in order, probably to do a walkthrough of it. But you cannot tell me that this, like, even Charlie Manson here with the Death Head Moth, you cannot tell me that this doesn't look like 90s album covers. It's just too perfect. Or like music videos, you know, the ones that showed all kinds of like strange cut-ins, you know? Look at that. And every card has your cord. I don't know what that was. Card has something. Even the pip cards. And you know, it's like I said, it's really funny. A lot of my references are like album covers because I spent so much time in like CD and record shops when I was young, because #music is life, and like we would go in and just spend all day. Sometimes we bought stuff, sometimes we didn't, but we would spend all day looking at, you know, CDs. Back in the day, looking at cassette singles of like what we wanted. And so it's just the best. This is so very nostalgic for me because I immediately think of those days. It's like I can smell the record shops. You know, they always had the incense in the corner, and so it always smelled like the mixture of patchouli and sandalwood, you know, and sort of like damp carpet. As gross as that sounds, but I mean, let's be fair, we're in South Louisiana. Yeah, anyway, these are my top 6 90s vibe, 90s feels decks. I would absolutely love to know what you guys are. If y'all did a VR, I'd love to see it. So let me know. I'm going peruse. Again, I watched, like I said, I watched quite a few. I don't always comment, but I did watch quite a few, and I'll probably go watch some more. I was like, let me stop and do mine before I, you know, ruin myself. You ever do that where it's like, oh, if I keep watching, I'm gonna like sway my thoughts? So I was like, okay, let me stop right now, pull my decks, do this, and then we'll go forward from there. But like, I have enjoyed this so much. It's just so much fun to do. And to see everybody's takes on it, because I've seen a few people take it like, oh, these are the decks they had and used in the 90s. These are the ones that remind them of, you know, their teenage years. These are the ones that, you know, remind them of the look, the feel, the, you know, it's very interesting, and it's great to hear people's stories. It is like a nostalgic kind of walk with everyone. So I hope you guys enjoyed this fun little VR. I had a blast talking about it and reminiscing just a little bit. And anyway, if you guys are looking for any of these decks, if I can find them, I will put links. If not, I will let you know down in the description box below. Down there you can find links to join the Mystic fam, which is the membership on this channel. They help keep this place going, and I love them so much. Thank you guys for being with me. We do all kinds of really fun stuff, so you can catch all that down below, as well as Through Fat Readers, which is a collaborative channel between myself, Dustin at Modern Metaphysique, and Lisa at Lisa Papez. We do once a month. We talk tarot and all kinds of fun stuff, so you can check that down below, as well as how to book a reading with me, my Etsy shop, all kinds of fun stuff. All the links are going to be down below. And yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, like, subscribe, do all the YouTube things. And I will talk to you guys very soon. I'm sending you all my love. Mwah! Later, Gators.